Hello, welcome to today's webinar. This is a continuation of our webinar series, Do More with DASI. Today's webinar is Make Controller, Alter Your Position Without Breaking an Arm. Welcome today, and thank you for joining me. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Mark Downey. I'm an application engineer with DASI Solutions. I am a degree mechanical engineer. I've been doing engineering for 31 years. I've got experience in a variety of locations. I started out in the defense industry, in the aerospace world. I worked for the automotive industry. I have done work with injection molding and extrusion tooling and consumer product design. I've been using SOLIDWORKS since 1997, and I started with DASI in August of last year. Since I joined with DASI, I've earned my CSWE, my CPPA, and I've also achieved a certified instructor certification. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started and look at today's webinar. I'd like to start off today with a poll. I'd like to know how long you've been using SOLIDWORKS. So let me pull up that poll and we'll launch it. Give everybody a chance to go through and answer the questions, and then we'll share the results. Like I said, myself, I've been using SOLIDWORKS since 1997. I've used it in all the positions I've had since I learned it in 1997, and I love using it. So it's a great tool. We'll give everybody a chance to do that, fill that in. Let's close that, and let's share that with everybody. So there's the results. It looks like we've got a pretty good mix of users so far. So the next thing I'd like to find out is what version of SOLIDWORKS everybody's using. So let's pull up the poll for that, and we'll launch that real quick. Today I'll be demonstrating SOLIDWORKS 2019 Service Pack 3, but of course DASI Solutions, we support all versions of SOLIDWORKS, so whatever version you're using, we'll be able to help you out if you have any questions. Looks like that one's finished up. We'll go ahead and share that with everybody real quick, kind of see. It looks like we've got half of you using SOLIDWORKS 2019. Great, that's good to hear. And we got some using some older versions there. So with that, let's get started. Today's topics, I'm going to start out just talking about the basics of what the Make Controller does. From there, we'll jump into taking a look at maybe a little puzzle and how we can use Make Controller to maybe solve something a little entertaining. And then we'll go into what I consider to be an advanced use of the Make Controller and how we can use that to control a robotic arm. So let's take a look at the basics. The basics are what mates are supported. Well, the angle mate, the distance mate, the limit angle mate, and the limit distance mate, of course, are controllable. A path mate, and path mates can be set up to be free-floating, but to use them with the Make Controller, you have to use either the distance along a path option or the percent along the path option. Same thing with the slot mate. You have to use either the distance or the percent along the slot. And then the width mate is the last mate that can be used with the Make Controller. And you can control either the dimension or percent on the width option. So let's take a look at a simple example just to start out with. We got this plunger hook, and the way this operates is as the plunger raises and lowers along the cylinder, the clamp arms open and close. And what we want to do is create a mate that we can control with the Make Controller. So I'm going to set up and grab the top surface of the plunger and the bottom surface of the pin, and we'll create a distance mate there. I'm going to set the initial mate to 0. We'll right mouse click and use a mouse gesture to go back to our trimetric view. And notice over here in the mate tree, we've got a variety of mates for the assembly. The Make Controller is located under the Insert option or Insert menu, Make Controller. Make controller brings up a dialog box that prompts you for a couple of different things. First, we need to put the mates that we want to control. You can either do that by going to the feature tree and selecting the mate that you want to control. Now notice if I try to select other mates here, it's not adding those. Those mates aren't valid for the mate controller. In this case, the only one valid is the distance mate. When I click on that, it adds it to the tree. I can also, let me go back and launch that mate controller again. I can collect all valid mates from an assembly by using this icon or this tool here, collect all supported mates. When I collect that, it's going to go ahead and grab that mate that's from the tree. So now I want to go ahead and set up some positions for moving this model around. The way this works is you've got a series, you set up a series of positions basically. So the first position is with the distance set to 0. I'm going to create a new position, so I'm going to click Add Position. It brings up a dialog box that allows me to name the position. I can name it whatever I want at this point. I'm going to go ahead and use position 2. In position 2, I want the red component to be located all the way down to the bottom of the assembly. So I'm going to set that distance to be 5 inches. I have to update that position by clicking the Update Position button. And now I've got that down to the bottom. And then let's do one more position before going back up to the top. We'll click position 3. In position 3, I want it back up to the top again. So what does that do for me? So now I've got those all done. I'm going to go ahead and click Calculate Animation. And you'll see that SOLIDWORKS then goes through and runs that position. Well, it didn't go back up. Well, what did I do? I didn't update the position. So let's go back to position 3. I want it to be 0. We'll click Update. Now let's run our animation. There we go. So that's how you set those up real quick and easy on a basic. Now let's just look at a couple of options here. Once I've got these set up, I've got the option to reorder positions. So this brings up a dialog box that allows me to change the orientation so I can move these around. I can also rename these at this point using this dialog box. So maybe, for example, I want to, at the bottom of the travel, I want to have a position where it jogs just a little bit so that it maybe releases whatever it's holding. So I'm going to go down to position 2, and I want to add another position in here that just backs this up maybe a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to go ahead and add a position. It's going to be position 4, and I can drag the model around in the screen to set the position by clicking this icon here to make the mate driven. When I click on that, I now can go over here and drag this to the position I want it to be located in, and it automatically in dragging that in the screen, it's updating the distance over here. Notice the asterisk symbol. That's called a dirty mark. That means that this step has not been updated yet. When I click Update Position, that icon goes away. So now I've got position 4, which is an updated position backed up just a little bit. I want it to go back down to the bottom position just as a jog. You know what, let's set this position to be 1/2 second. And so let's add one more position, which is going to be the bottom position. Well, position 3 is our bottom position, right? So we'll go back to position 3. Oh, position 3 is the top. Position 2 is the bottom. So I'm going to put it in position 2, and I'm going to create a new position. It's going to be based off of position 2, and we'll click OK. So let's run this animation, and let's see what we've got. So we're coming down to the bottom. It's going back up to the top. Oh, it's jumping down to the 1/2 position. Well, that's not quite what I want to do. I basically want it to do 4 and 5 before I get to position 3. So let's go back up here and go to position 1. But I want 4 and 5 to be above 3. So let's move 3 down to the bottom. Click OK. And now let's run our animation again. It's coming down to the bottom, jogs up, does a little bit of release, and then back up to the top. So that's how you edit your positions. Again, you can rename those if you wanted to. Once I've got that done, I can save this out as an AVI as well. So down here at the bottom is to save this out as an AVI. There's also a slider at the bottom that allows me to kind of move this through the positions. So I can move it through the positions manually after I've got them calculated. To save that AVI out, you click on Save. You got the option to save it as an AVI. You can save it as an MP4. You got a variety of options to go through there. I'm going to save that for another animation, but that's how you get to that. Once you've got your Make controller set up, you go ahead and click OK. That adds it to the feature tree at the bottom, and you're ready to use that for your models down the road. And I'll show some other capabilities of that on the next model. Okay, so that's our simple example. So how about a puzzle? Let's take a look at a puzzle. I created this puzzle box to just demonstrate a couple of things I thought would be interesting. So I've already got a Make controller set up in this one. I'm going to just go ahead and bring it up real quick and run through an animation. So you want to make this puzzle box. I want to be able to open this puzzle box by pressing a series of these buttons at the bottom. And the way I've got this set up is you press the last button in, you press the next button in, then this one, then the middle one, then the last one, and you can slide the box open. So to make that work, I dreamed up a little mechanism that I'm going to pull up here. So this is a slide mechanism that I came up with to be able to do this. And I'll show the mates that I've got related for this. So I've got a series of slide mates over here that control the positions of these slides. And I'm just going to go ahead and suppress these real quick and show that I've got mates in here that control these slides, if you will, just up and down. They're controlled within the plane. I've created a lock position here. I'm going to unsuppress that lock position. Those mates that are in that folder just bring everything back to the lock position, give me back my start position. So I'm going to suppress those. We'll go in here and unsuppress the mates at the bottom. And now let's set up the Make controller to drive this the way we want. So when we press the buttons, the slides are going the way we want. So again, I go up to the Insert menu, Make controller. I'm going to go ahead and collect all supported mates. In this case, it's the slider positions. I've already named them. And position 1 is the position I've got shown on the screen. Position 2 is going to be the next position. I'm going to go ahead and create position 2. In position 2, I want this slider over here, and you can see when I click on the dialog box, it highlights the elements that I've got here. I want this to be raised up 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to go here and say minus 0.5, and that slider goes up. And when I do that, I would expect this slider to slide to the left, which is the next slider up here. And that one's going to increase by 1/2 inch. So I'm going to do plus 0.5. And I'm going to go ahead and save that position. All right. Let's do the next position, position 3. Position 3, I want this slider to be able to push up into that opening. So I'm going to go ahead and do minus 0.5 for that position as well, and then update that position, and then just keep going through the steps. We'll do another position, position 4. In that position, I want this slider to go up and push this one over. So minus 0.5 for that position, and this position is going to be minus 0.5. We'll update that position. Position 5 is going to be the next slider is going to push that button. It's going to slide that one up. So I'm going to go up 1/2 inch on that one. Update that position. Next position 6 is to push this button up. So 1/2 inch up on that one and 1/2 inch in on this one. We'll update that position. Let's see what that looks like now. So we'll go ahead and generate the animation. So there we got that slider going up, that slider sliding in, that opens up the next slider, and then this next slider goes up, and perfect. So the last position is when I reset to reset all the buttons. I've got it set up to where when this slider slides back over, all the sliders should reset. Well, I'm going to go back to position 1, which is my start position. I'm going to add a position for that one, which is position 7. And now when I run through the animation, It's going to push each slider up into position. Of course, the last slider's got this unlock feature that's going to release the drawer to be able to slide open. And then by pushing on that top slider, it's going to reset everything back to lock position. Pretty cool. So that's the mate controller. That's setting that up for that puzzle box. I hope that was helpful for everybody. So we'll close that one out. And then the model you've all come to see is the robotic arm. So let's take a look at the robotic arm model and what mate controllers do for us in this model. So the mate controller, you got a model like this that's got a lot of degrees of freedom. If I move this model around, you can see we've got, motion around the axis on the base. We've got a motion on the arm up here. When you got a model like this that's got a lot of degrees of freedom, it can be challenging to get it in the right position and put it exactly where you want it. Using the mate controller, you can set up those angles to be where you want them to be. So I'm going to let's bring up the mate controller. I'm going to right-click, edit the feature. We'll go ahead and put it back in the home position, and let's bring up our start position for our saved position to start with. And so you can see each of the mates that have been set up for here, we've named the mates so that it's easy to go through them. We've got the the base twist, the upper angle, elbow, and so on. And each of these positions has been set up with the corresponding mates. You can see the mates that are listed along the side over here. Let's go to position. We've got pickup position, and we've got a closed jaw position. So each of these mates are controlled through the mate controller. And you can use the sliders to adjust the mates to the positions you want and set those up. Once they're all set up, you can go through the animation. And of course, you can save that out as an AVI. So I'll go ahead and show how that works this time. I'm going to click Save as an AVI or MPEG. I like to use the MPEG option. You can set your aspect ratio for all those. Go ahead and click Save. It's going to go through those steps. And create that video file output. Just like that. So let's take a look at that video file output. Let's go ahead and save that for a second. We'll go down here and open the folder for that. And let's take a look at what that MPEG created. So there's the output. This is something you can send to your customers. You can put on, you can share it however you need on social media. So that's saving out the AVI file. You can also bring this up in a motion study and use the mate controller animation in a motion study. When you bring up a motion study and click on the animation wizard, you'll see down at the bottom, if you've got a mate controller in the assembly, you'll see mate controller listed. When you click on that, click Next. You can use this to generate key points or do this for motion analysis. I'll use the key points. We'll click Next and Finish. That generates the same type of thing for the motion study. We can click Calculate, and we can see how that goes through and uses get the same results. So you can use this, once you've got your mate controller, you can use this in other studies to study the motion of the assembly. All right. So that is the mate controller. It's fairly simple to use, fairly straightforward. You set up your steps, you set up your mates, and run it through the motions. So I guess I'd like to wrap up with a quick poll on whether you find this is something that you could use in your job. Is it useful for what you're doing? Something you see a use for. I'll go ahead and close that real quick and share those results. It looks like most everybody thinks it's got some use, but some of the people may be not sure whether it'll work or not for them. It just depends on what your requirements are. So quick and easy, took about 20 minutes. I hope everybody got what you needed. Let's see if there's any questions. I'll open it up for questions real quick. If you got any questions, you can type them in the question box, and be happy to answer those now. If not, I really appreciate everybody's joining me today for this quick little video. Can you use them to render animation? Yes, you can you can render them using the Photo 360 if you do that. Can you show us an overlap? I'm not sure what you mean by overlap, Robert. Maybe you have to expand on that a little bit. Time setting, you can set the time when you render that in the using the motion study, you can adjust your key settings down there at the bottom. So yes, that's possible. Using Photo View 360, yes, you can use Photo View 360 to render that. How to set the custom intervals? Oh, so let's how's animation different than Make Controller? Let's do the custom intervals. So let's jump back into this for a second. You can set those times and jump back over to SOLIDWORKS here. So in the Make Controller down here to set custom times, let's go ahead and edit that. Down here in the steps, as you create each step, you set the time you want. So if you want the pickup to last 3 seconds, for example, you put your time in there, and then when you generate the animation, it gets to that pickup position, and that pickup position will dwell for 3 seconds. So that's setting up the timings. I hope that answers the question. Animation different than the Make Controller. The Make Controller is used to set up the different positions for the mate, and then you can and it calculates the position from it calculates the transition from each position as it goes along. One other thing I forgot to mention, if everybody's still watching, is you can set up different configurations for each position. So say, for example, home 0, I can click on this Add Configuration button, and it adds that to the Configuration tab. So maybe I want to make a drawing of this in each position. So I can put it in each, there was the home position, we'll put it in the pickup position and add a configuration. And let's go down to Place Object and add a configuration for that. When I do that and go to the Configuration tab, I now have configurations for each of those positions that I can use in, say, a drawing, for example. So I meant to mention that. Let's see. In a cell assembly where you have multiple sub-assemblies, can Make Controller, oh yes, definitely, yes. The Making Controller can be used. Basically, if you've got multiple sub-assemblies, you're using a Make Controller for each one. So yeah, you can definitely do that. An overlap of one motion starting before a second motion ends. So if you, okay, so I understand I think I understand what you're saying there. So if you've got 2 assemblies in there with a sub-assembly, yeah, so I think what would come into play there, if we jump back over to my example with the sliders in the puzzle box, you notice that I did 2 sliders. I did just two separate mates for the sliders, but they operated at the same time when I ran that. So I think you'd probably set them up as if you had a fixture and another part coming in to that fixture, you would overlap them by setting the mates to run at the same time. I think that's how you would set that up. I hope that answers the question. So the next question from Jim is, so this is more or less an animation key controller using mates. I was thinking this was how to group, bias, or otherwise add weight to an awkward bunch of complex mates to make it more draggable. No, it is basically setting up, you're controlling the mates, you're doing a group of mates to control them, and giving you basically setting up steps for it. So that's really all it's for. Yep. All right, well, with that, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you for joining DASI in our webinar series. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us. You can email us tech support at dasi-solutions.com. We can answer any questions that way. And you can email me directly as well. Mine's mdowney@dasi-solutions.com, and you answer any questions that way as well. There'll be a recording of this on the DASI YouTube channel as well if you like to see it again down the road. Again, thank you for everybody for joining us, and have a great day.